see you again. Thank you for joining me. And today we are going to be looking at, he says, adjusting his chair so he's a bit higher in the frame. Today we're going to be looking at the new Woods supplement book, the Almanac. Now, potted history of oak-bound books and supplements. The Woods second edition came out in 2019, and I guess probably a lot of people will be unaware that it's that old. I say that old. I mean, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but there's the whole sort of pandemic thing compressing time. It's really messed up my ideas of the last 5 years. But yeah, this came out in 2019. Actually, for Salute, I had pre-orders for Salute, and then got stung by the dodgy printers that I was using, printers that I'd used before, who delivered okay on the first edition, and then basically took my money and didn't give me books. Long story short, went through small claims court, nothing came of it, although I got awarded. That didn't mean anything because I couldn't find the company. Lots of other people have got stung by this company. Their director is now not allowed to be a director anymore, but still seems to be operating. It's all a big mess, and lots of people lost lots of money, including us. We lost about £1,000 on printing through that debacle, which meant having to borrow money, and then it was all a mess. Anyway, so late in 2019, it was sort of late summer. Finally got these books out to people. Not these. This is a print-on-demand one, which is what we sell now. But the original print run came out. So if you're one of the fortunate people who's got one of those first 100 with the wraparound cover, this one, because of the way the printing works, has to break for the spine. Otherwise, it gets automatically rejected. But if you've got the matte cover with the wraparound, lucky you, you're one of the people who's got the first 100 print runs. It's also got black end pages and other nice things, and maybe we should do another run of those at some point, because this has now sold over 600 copies through Wargame Vault, which is exciting. That's seems like quite a lot to me, being small and not doing much in the way of advertising. So exciting. Anyway, this came out in 2019, is what I'm really trying to say there. And my hope was to get a supplement every year. I figured that was kind of pretty reasonable. Obviously, things happened in 2020 that meant that I was at home for quite a lot of the time, so I was able to get Mythic Cycles out at the end of that year. This was the first supplement, and then the following year I did a reissue of Barrow Ring Burning, which was the kind of roleplay campaign that I had written for first edition. So I revised it, didn't rewrite huge amounts of it, I just tweaked it to work with second edition, changed some of the layout, added some new artwork and things, and changed the cover, well, not the main cover image, but changed the colour to match the second edition. So that came out in 2021. And 2022, things were busy, so I didn't manage to get a supplement out. I did rework Factious Waste into a new format, so that came out that year. And I was working on Tableaus, which came out last year. Came out about this time last year, and this contains some stuff that I had been working on since first edition. It contains some stuff that I had been trying to do the year over the previous year, and just I kept coming back to it and kind of getting stuck. So there were bits of this that were a bit of a slog to get out. So it was really good to get this out, and I think it's a worthwhile addition. But it wasn't the easiest or the most fun project sometimes to be working on. It was quite an arduous thing. So this year I wanted to get another supplement out, but I felt a bit sort of drained from finishing Tableaus off. So I didn't want to dedicate too much time to producing new things. I mean, things in personal private life are also quite hectic, quite difficult at the moment, and I don't have the time to focus on lots of new things, seeing a project through from start to finish. But what I do have is quite a big archive of material that I've produced for the Acorn, which is our monthly free e-zine newsletter, but with game content as well. So hopefully it's a bit more than just a buy our stuff newsletter. And that's free. You can get that from signing up to our website. You go to oakbound.co.uk/news. You can get your copy of the Acorn free first Friday of every month normally. And that had been going for 3 years. So there was quite a lot of content in there, and I'd also written a few articles for Miniature War Games magazine. So we had quite a lot of content that was sitting in an archive, and if you sign up to the Acorn you have access to the archive, so you can go and see that material. But the archive was getting quite big, quite full. When you've got sort of over 40 issues to go back through, it's quite hard to find stuff. So that stuff is now not in the archive. We started the archive afresh from the beginning of this year, but we wanted to put it into a compendium so that it was much easier to reference and tweak a few bits and sort of spend a bit more time on some bits, because when you're writing for a magazine or you're writing for a newsletter, you have to be quite brief sometimes. And sometimes things would string across several different issues, and I wanted to collate that into one place and make sure that it was a cohesive whole. So yeah, it was a good opportunity to rework that. So that's what the Almanac is. It does say on the spine here, it's the best of the Acorn, and there was enough here for me to think this is worth bringing out another hard copy, good solid hard copy, glossy, shiny book with lovely artwork that Matthew Street did. It's been great seeing this develop, and if you want prints, ask Matthew. Find him on Facebook, he's around, and on Instagram in fact. Find him and he'll get you some prints of this. This is the full image. I had to crop it for aspect ratio on the front. I know artists hate that. The full image is on the back there. Anyway, so yeah, that's what this is. This is a kind of best of the Acorn. Plus a few bits from other places. So that's enough preamble. Let's take a look and see what's inside it. Here we are again then, green on green, excellent, with all of the leftover bits of metal from packing Salute miniatures and restocking after Salute and all of the rest of that saga. Let's get rid of all the bits of metal, and obviously shiny, glossy, lovely cover, but reflects quite a lot of the light, so won't be a problem when we get inside. This one is full colour. The other supplements that I've produced have been in black and white. That's, I say, purely a cost thing. It's not purely a cost thing. It's partly because I like the aesthetic of the kind of black and white line work. Maybe that's a slightly kind of nostalgia thing, but I think you can create a lot of atmosphere through a black and white document, just relying on tone and texture to sell it for you, as it were. But yeah, mostly this is softback and in black and white as a cost thing, because these are going through print on demand, and print on demand prices are not the cheapest, but it works for us because it means I don't have to keep stocks of hundreds of these, which I don't have space for, especially now I've got four full supplements. I barely had space to store 100 books. It was a relief to get those out. But this one's in full colour because a lot of the Acorn stuff was in full colour, and we've got lots of nice photos to show off this time as well. If you have been with us since first edition, you may recognise the backing pages of these dividers. Again, I'm trying to stick with the same format. So in the original rulebook, the various sections of the book were divided by Let me find one. It will divide by these pages, textural backgrounds with a bit of flavor text there, a bit of an explanation as to what's coming in the next section, and then this kind of introduction, sort of title page to introduce the next section. So I'm keeping to that format, with a bit of flavor text on this side, and then the title, and then the next section. But you may recognise these textural backgrounds from the first edition book. These were used as backgrounds for some of the text in the original Secrets of Shandisol rulebook. And these bits of flavour text here, a lot of these come from that book actually. There was quite a lot of kind of creative writing pieces that tried to set the scene that I've taken out and put in here, because I think few enough people have that first book that it deserves a reprint. So this first section is what I've called the rules articles, and this is just snippets, really, bits and pieces that you can add into your game as and when you want, to add extra interest, flavour, flexibility, whatever. So we've got the section that kicked off the very first few issues of the Acorn on votive offerings, offerings to spirits of earth, air, and water, and what they will do for you in return. And I got some nice new artwork done from this is a David Thierry piece, as is the worm here. But yeah, got some new artwork from various artists that we'll find on the way across, and I wanted to put in lots of these photos now that we've got nice photos of miniatures. This one was around at the time of the rulebook, but we've released a lot of miniatures since the rulebook came out, and I wanted to be able to update photos of oakbound miniatures. Anyway, this is related to this article here, classification of worms. So worms are in the Mythic Cycles supplement, but here's how to make them. Red worms, black worms, white worms, gold worms, and green worms. The various classifications all work slightly differently. Here's another David Thierry. Was that 3 David Thierrys in 3 pages? I used them up quite quickly, didn't I? Another David Thierry post. The Harvester of Souls talks about Sluar there, or Slough, or however you say them. They appear in Barrowing Burning, but this is rules for using them more generally in Games of the Woods. Acolytes are it's a skill that you can give to members of your warband to help Fate Weavers out, to help Fate Weavers gather for casting quicker. Here's some new Tony Huff illustrations. Mercenaries, we did a Mercenaries Kickstarter for some sort of more medieval looking mercenaries, which we don't sell now. They've passed on to someone else, but here were some rules for using mercenary characters in amongst your warband should you wish to do that. Rules for the Queen of the Fae. Some rules that were sent in by some of our readers. It's always nice to get stuff. If you have ideas and you want to come up with some new rules or a new scenario, or you just want to take photos of your warband and write a little bit about how you chose your warband and how they're doing, always great to hear from you. Please do send them in, info@oakbound.co.uk, and we'll stick them in the Acorn. It's always great. Or stick them up on the Facebook group, the Woods Worldwide Players Circle. It's always great for it not to be my voice monotonously in these things. I like to have other input. But anyway, this is Ryan and Matthew wrote some rules for equipment that you can add to your miniatures. Wardens and Wretches of Carody was an article that was penned as a prelude to tableaus. So that's an introduction to some of the new characters that appear in tableaus, but also a standalone warband generator, generating warbands in a slightly different way based on the faction recruitment system that was in Factious Waste, but tweaked slightly. Fizzy Rust and the Cheese Farmers, you will note there are a few satirical pieces that were current at the time that they came out in the Acorn that maybe are not remembered so fondly, but anyway, Fizzy Rust being a particularly brainless Spriggan, and her obsession with cheese. Guild endorsements. Now, I'm going to be talking about gnomes next week, hopefully. I'm going to be talking about gnome warbands, and this is something that was written as a way of making gnome warbands more useful. So I will be talking about them next week, the various disadvantages and ways of dealing with those disadvantages with gnome warbands. But this one puts in the light knights, the heat seekers, the heat lancers, and the horn sounders. The models that we've had available from the gnomes really from quite early in the second edition, but that were only playable in battle mode. You couldn't really take them in skirmish. You could buy the equipment, but it was expensive and you couldn't start off with it. So guild endorsements just gives gnome warbands a chance to start off with those pieces of equipment at a bit of a cost, but they're quite effective pieces of equipment. White Goats of the Woods is another warband. Sometimes we have sort of new warbands, and again this draws from another supplement. This draws from the events of Barrow Ring Burning, but then sort of develops it into a warband that can be used in any game. More rules for working with animals in games. Chariots. So we've had vehicles in Factious Waste, and of course the vehicle rules in Factious Waste are completely compatible with the Woods. We really wanted those systems to be workable both ways. So if you wanted to have a sort of sci-fantasy game, you could do, but chariots being animal drawn, not motorized, work in a slightly different way along the same principles. So this was rules and templates for using those. The Woods in Winter is our sort of December article, December special, and so this is a collection of all of those sort of wintry themed, Christmassy type, Yule type adventures, and extra rules and bits and pieces. Here are photos from the first Woods in the Woods Games Day, which this year is on the 29th of June. It'd be great to see you. So here's photos of the various warbands that were involved and some of the tables, and I've tried to separate out the sections in this compilation with those pictures of people playing the game. Here's the second section. This is labelled scenarios. So this is kind of framework for playing games. Spriggan Raid, which was an early second edition article for Miniature Wargames magazine. Fear and Loathing in Talavlar again was an article for Miniature Wargames magazine. This was on how to get the most out of your Fey warbands, but also includes a kind of rolling road wild hunt scenario. As you can see, this was quite a lengthy piece. This is another piece by another player of the game, so Rodri Hamilton came up with this additional list of objectives that are specific to warbands, so to give a particular flavour to things that a particular warband might want to do and might perhaps be better at doing or particularly skilled at doing. So it just adds to the choices of warband. Scowls of the Leprechauns is another scenario. Again, this is a prelude to a piece that's in Tableaus of Talavlar, but works as a standalone scenario as well. And then Reek of the Fens isn't really a whole separate section, but this is a kind of combined piece. So this was a section that was in Secrets of Shandusholm and was the kind of highlight, I guess, of that book. So after you had the rules, this was a narrative campaign to play through, and it starts off giving you a section of scenarios. So rather than each warband picking an objective, in this case you've got a very particular scenario with particular board layout and things that each side are trying to achieve. And a lot of this was designed as you can play it as 2 warbands, of course, or more than 2 warbands, but designed as 1 warband against their adversaries. So when it comes to the actual narrative campaign, Reek of the Fens, you're playing, or one player is playing, or each player is playing a character from a Tuatha warband that are facing different adversaries in each of the scenarios as they play them through. And there's a bit of a kind of choose your own adventure path to go through, and it will prompt you to play different combinations of scenarios against different enemies from these ones listed. And then there's a final kind of climactic scenario with a bigger board and a bit more involved narrative detail in that one, so it's a longer game. Here's photos from the second Woods in the Woods Games Day. Here are some modelling articles. Again, a lot of these have appeared in the original Secrets of Shandisholm book, certainly all this. The details are on, can't find out. Oh yeah, here, this thing on realistic trees and other types of trees and huts. This is from the original Secrets of Shandisholm book. Then the Frondleaf Leprechaun wood terrain that I made for that scenario and documented on the newsletter, serialized in the newsletter. A little bit from my blog, because I didn't want to put too much in from my blog, because my blog is mostly hobby stuff. That's the Finn McCall's blog. Hobby stuff as separate from Oakbound specific stuff. But I did want to put this article in, partly to make up a bit of space. I had a page going free, but partly because I felt like there was a bit of information in here that was useful in relation to the previous articles and related, so I just threw that in. Some stuff on snow. There are more and more and more pictures in these games days, which hopefully is representative of the numbers. The more pictures, the more people there were in attendance, the more people I'm trying to make sure I've got a picture of in each of these photos, and the more warbands I'm trying to capture. So hopefully it's indicative of a growing event. Castle of Cromdon Crake was a few years ago. I think it might have been two years ago. And this is a big multi-warband campaign set in a crumbling old castle. So it's got warband specific introductions, and then you're fighting over a bunch of maps, and each area, each territory within the castle relates to the others in a certain way and lets you do separate things in between games. So this is quite an involved warband campaign, which ran over, I think, 4, possibly 5 issues. It was a significant amount of the year, and I'm not going to give too much away, because there's a lot of kind of hidden stuff in here for somebody who's running the campaign. It doesn't just end up in the castle. It sort of spews out and goes in plot twist direction. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but hopefully that's an interesting campaign to run. And then here's the section on regional campaigns. This was a more recent look at ways of organising campaigns, this time taking as a starting point creating a map. So here's like a sample map that I created from these. This is random dice rolling, so it's a bit different to most of the Woods, which tries to avoid random dice rolling, but I do like random map creation and things, and it doesn't give any of the players necessarily a significant advantage, because all you're doing is randomly generating the terrain, and then players can interact with it, so everyone has an equal opportunity to interact with what's there. And it just uses this. So again, you have if you have access to settlements and cities, that gives you more things that you can do in between games. You're trying to make sure that you can feed your warband and trade your way up the ladder. So yeah, it gives it a framework for playing the games, other than a straight kind of linear narrative storyline. Just different ways of playing, different approaches to playing the game, which I think is quite interesting, thinking slightly outside the box and hopefully encouraging players to think slightly outside the box and come up with their own ways of wanting to play as well. And then at the back here we've got a section of FAQ errata. Obviously we've had several years of playing the second edition now, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I want to put out a third edition, but there are things that have cropped up that people have asked that are perhaps not so clear in the rulebook. Not things that we've changed necessarily, but there were some issues that people have found that have been sort of corrected, explained away, and so that takes place in this section. Notably, I would call your attention to the orders section here, because whenever this is something that came out of the first games day, whenever you get a bunch of players together and some of them are more sort of power gamey oriented than others. We had a couple of people at the first games day who were very much sort of looking for ways to metagame the system, and they came up with some really devastating combinations using the orders, and I wasn't supervising each of their games, so I think sometimes they were taken out of the spirit and not necessarily with the letter of the rules. But anyway, here is just some clarifications and some extra rules to prevent that from getting out of hand, if that's the way that you play. These QR codes dotted throughout will point you to the players groups, the map, the player finder map, a few other bits and pieces, just resources for playing, link to the latest games day information, and there you are. That is what is in this fairly thick tome, the Almanac. So as I say, next week hopefully I'm going to be talking a bit about how to get the most out of gnome warbands in the woods, and then we'll be in May. Wow, the year is just flying by. So if you haven't already signed up, head over to oakbound.co.uk/news and you can start afresh your Acorn collection from here, because you can pick up this, which is all of the previous. This is in our shop now, and also available through Wargame Vault, and this is not all of, but all of the Woods content from the previous 3 years, and we're not going to be stopping anytime soon putting that content out, so yeah, worth signing up to that, and I shall see you next week. Take care.